Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Rich Souls podcast. This is your host, Saara, and I've got another guest for you today. Today's guest is Morgan O'Hare. She is the CEO and founder of Present Practice, which is a yoga studio based here in Austin, Texas. And I met Morgan as a part of South by Southwest, which, if you didn't know, is a huge conference that goes on here in Austin every single March and that I am a veteran of. This year when I went, I happened to stumble into the 7-day activation called Yoga House at Present Practice that I later found out Morgan just had the idea for like a couple of weeks before putting on this whole production. And that is honestly shocking because it was so well done. The space is so beautiful. And there were great conversations. I ended up attending, I think, 4 of the sessions, and they had like 4 a day for the 7 days. But considering that it was not a part of normal South by Southwest programming, I feel like that's kind of saying a lot. I was just blown away by the vibe of the sessions that I did attend and of the studio and Morgan and her team. And I knew specifically on the last day, the last session where Morgan just gave an overview of her story and like kind of, summarized the journey of going through the chakra system in order to bring her vision for Present Practice into life, what that actually like looked like in her life, like using her life as a case study, and that it would make for a perfect conversation to have here on Rich Souls, because the show in part is about bridging the mystical and the practical. And Morgan is just so great at describing just that, but specifically through the chakra system. And so we're going to talk more about her background, and then we get into the concept for the activation. And she really deep dives on each of the chakras and kind of explains not only the role that they have in bringing our vision to life, but also in the types of activities or even the types of blocks that we might hit in activating that chakra as a part of our process. So I hope you enjoy. And with that, I'm going to send you off into the episode. Welcome to the podcast, Morgan.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
So glad to have you. So just a little bit of background for the listeners. Actually, I'll probably have this in the intro a little bit, but I met Morgan fairly recently at South by Southwest because she had a download, I think was it 2 weeks out from South by?
Yeah, it was like 2 or 3 weeks before. It was actually on February 17th, which was like the whole Lunar New year of the fire horse. And I was like, what's coming today? And I was like, oh, okay, this is big.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Clearly it's been big when you decided to host Yoga House. And if people don't know what South by Southwest is, by the way, because it's like also just really hard to understand what it is. It's essentially a conference that mixes multiple industries at once, and it takes over downtown Austin. They host some in other parts of the world. As a part of it, Morgan decided to host an activation called Yoga House, just like within that 2 to 3 week time span. And it was all about, well, Morgan, why don't you tell us what it's all about? Because I have like my interpretation, but I want to hear from you.
Yeah, so Yoga House is really an activation on the manifestation process from expanded awareness or elevated consciousness into actually like creating physical form. So idea into reality and ultimately into impact, and getting clear or conscious on the ultimate like impact that you're wanting to have through aligning to your purpose and to what you're truly here to do. So we'll dive into this more, but Present Practice and yoga itself is all about living from the inside out. And so with the South by Southwest audience, a lot of them are founders, entrepreneurs. I'm a founder and entrepreneur. And for a long time, I had a weird relationship with the identity of being an entrepreneur or founder. I saw business as this thing that kind of like went against what yoga is all about. But this framing really helped me shift and understand that, business is like the ultimate act of manifestation. You're constantly, as an entrepreneur, getting an idea and getting to bring that into reality and actually see the impact that what started as just an idea or inspiration was. And so it was all about how you build companies or communities or organizations from the inside out. So from a way that is truly rooted in your purpose, your authenticity, and really in alignment with what you're here to do and the ultimate impact that you're wanting to have.
Yeah. Which usually for the podcast, like I'll have an idea of what the title will be before I even have the conversation. Sometimes before I even write the questions. And I was like, oh, yours is like bringing, I think, what was it? Bringing vision into form or something like that. And I'm like, well, yeah, that makes sense because of the series at Yoga House. So I ended up attending over 7 days, I think like 4 or 5 of the sessions going through the chakra system, which, yeah, we'll get into a little bit more later on in the show. And yeah, and obviously your stories are just so amazing. So I'm excited to like tuck into them. And obviously I've now heard some of them, but hopefully I'm excited to like, I'm sure I'll hear more layers to it because it's been like a kind of fast journey. Like honestly, hearing your story, I'm like, things can happen like fairly quickly, obviously over several years, but it was like technically over 5 years. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start with, for anybody who doesn't know you, what do you do?
So at my very core, I'm a teacher, I'm a founder, I'm a builder. I really like weaving teams of people together. So I have a corporate background where I was in strategy consulting, and then I headed strategy at a tech company, overseeing all people and like essentially how people weave together to execute on a company's vision. And so now being the founder and the CEO of Present Practice, I get to do all of that, but for the thing that's always really lit me up. So at my very core, I'm a yoga teacher. I've done it for over a decade. I run a ton of yoga teacher trainings, and I'm also now shifting into the space of being like more of a thought leader and like how to do business in a way that also is aligned with what yoga teaches. The entire mission of Present Practice is to be the embodiment of what we call karma yoga. And karma yoga is the yoga of action. So it's how you live yoga off the mat, essentially. And its core teaching is it doesn't matter what you're doing. It matters how you do it. And that's really what I built an entire business around, and how I built teams, how I align to our strategic priorities, and aligned to just like the direction that we're going as a company, staying really aligned to what yoga is here to teach us, which is really all about living from the inside out. And that's how it led to the South by Activation that was all about, like, well, then how do we build from the inside out? I'm also shifting into being more of a writer and an author. I'm working on my first book. I have a proposal due this month. So that's been a really exciting shift as well. But I've always done a lot of different things. And now with Present Practice, it really is this like full container that gets to be the embodiment of what I'm all about.
Did you ever learn what your human design was? Because I remember I asked at South by.
It's funny. I kind of like to keep people guessing because everyone's like, oh, you're a manifesting generator, but I'm pretty sure I'm a generator. And I think because I can focus on like the one thing, which like Present Practice is all these different things, but at its very core, it's like, well, how do we like change the world by teaching people how to live from the inside out, and how like everything they do, everything they build can also be aligned with who they truly are, not just what like society tells you to be, like to really live a life that feels like yours. And so when people hear that I get very drained when I'm focusing on anything that's not like my thing, my vision, they're like, oh, maybe you are a generator. I've also heard something with numbers, like someone said I was a 3. It means you have to like fail a bunch of times to get it right. Like you learn through failing, which is like definitely the case for me. Like I have to just try out all the bad ideas just to prove to myself like, oh yeah, those were bad ideas. Like now I'm on the good one.
Every time I've heard from you, I'm like, yeah, I can't tell what you are. I mean, like you sound so MG, and MGs also get tired if they're doing the wrong, like an unaligned thing. So, but I guess you're just going to keep us all guessing.
I know. I kind of just want to keep everyone guessing, but I have so many friends that are like, just send me your birth time. I'll do it all for you. Like I know my birth time. I know all of that, but something about it is kind of fun to be still not like discovery phase.
Yeah. Honestly, I can appreciate that because if anything, I love systems, like, but at the same time, they're just like creations of the mind in part. And so it's like being, especially with, I love how you're putting it of like living from the inside out and teaching people how to do that in their lives too. It's like, that really is like, it's like you're saying, like it's called karmic yoga or karma yoga?
Karma yoga. So
karma
there's
yoga.
Different types of yoga. What most of us probably know is Raja yoga. This is like the yoga of practice. So the asana, or the physical postures, the breath control, the meditation, like this is all like Raja yoga or the royal path. Jnana yoga, that is like the wisdom yoga. So it's all about study, self-study, but also study of yogic philosophy and scripture. And that is like the other one that I like love and light up about. Obviously, I love the practice side too, and like I've taught and built a whole studio around that. But I really love like the self-study aspect, and like that's what we weave so much into our teacher training programs. And then Bhakti Yoga is the yoga of devotion. So if you're familiar with Ram Dass, he was a big Bhakti yogi, all about like love. And so I love all the different types of yoga. Karma yoga is the fourth one, and that is like the yoga of action. So it's really like, how do we then interact in the world? Like how do we human, which I think is like, especially now with how much the world is changing with AI taking over so much, it's really like, okay, well then how do we live our lives and how do we stay really aligned to ultimately who we are? And, yoga is like very core teaching is that we are not the form. We are not the form of the manifestation. We tend to attach to our physical body, our identities, our jobs, the money that we get from our jobs, the material possessions that we have. But yoga teaches us that we are the formless, like we are this eternal self, like we are the creator, we're not the victim. And that like what's inside of me is also what's inside of you. Like you recognize what the true self is, which is this eternal consciousness. But all of our suffering is because we tend to attach just to the form of the manifestation.
I feel that. Okay, I'm always so fascinated by people's process of figuring out what their thing is. Not that there's ever necessarily like one thing for some people, but obviously like yoga is your passion. And I think you shared that you had started when you were like a teenager. So how did you like come to know, that was your thing?
I would say just like follow the joy, follow the excitement. I landed upon yoga in high school, like thank goodness, because I don't know what my life would be like if I didn't. I was always a really like high achieving person. I very much tied my worth to, this was, high school. So it was like being at the top of my class, getting shout outs from the teachers. I was like cheer captain. I was just like doing all the things that I was told I needed to do to have value in the world. And yoga was the first time or the first experience where I started to like actually feel who I truly was. And at the time, I didn't have the vocabulary to understand it. At the time, I really thought it was just like the heated room and these postures that were making me feel so good. And it was that my body was just getting more balanced and stronger and all of that. But once I had gone through my first teacher training when I was 18, so I was just a freshman in college, I started to learn these concepts of like the 8-limb path and the yamas and the niyamas, and that like the whole objective of yoga is ultimately to become who you're meant to be, to realize who you truly are, and to bring that forth. And it's been just like such a beautiful journey that I did find yoga when I did, and it's continued just to evolve with me in so many different ways. And I just continued to follow what felt right. And, for a long time, like I practiced and taught yoga for almost 10 years before I ever transitioned out of the corporate world to actually pursue it. That was not even like a thought that had crossed my mind for a while, that was even a possibility. I just knew yoga is like what brought me home to myself and gave me the clarity that I needed to then do the rest of my life.
What made you decide to do that teacher training when you were 18?
When I went into it, it was like pretty last minute. I didn't think too much about it. I just knew that I loved it. And again, kind of just like followed the excitement. And at that time, like I really signed up because I was like, I want perfect alignment on my warrior twos. I want to get my handstand. I want to deepen my back bends. I want to learn all these different postures. I really just went into it for the physical. And I'm so thankful that I did. And that's how many people find the practices. They're like, oh, it's a workout. It's really good for you. It's good for detoxification. It's good for flexibility. I can touch my toes. It's good for stress management. But then you start to like have this inner experience where you realize that it's actually so much more than the physical, even than the energetic.
Yeah, it's insane. I've been incorporating yoga into like my pre-recording rituals, and I'm like, okay, I'm pretty sure this is gonna need to stay here because it's just so amazing for like connecting with the body, but then also through connection to the body, like kind of connecting with like my higher self, essentially. Yeah. Okay, you kind of started talking to this, but I want to kind of paint the picture for listeners about your background. So kind of like starting with, growing up and having this idea of what you needed to do in order to be successful following that path through to corporate and then making the leap into the unknown that ended up being entrepreneurship. Can you speak more to the details of like that story arc?
Yeah. So growing up, I like very much at a young age realized that I could identify as an impressive person, that there was a part of me that realized like when I got good grades, when I had the most impressive like project in the classroom, or I was also a competitive gymnast. It was like, if I can win the competition and do these crazy things with my body, that I felt like my value was more. So from an early age, and I think like that competitive gymnastics background as well, really kind of like ingrained this into me, that my whole identity started to shape around being this impressive person. And that I was attached to that. And it was like, okay, well, who am I then if like I don't get the best grades in class, or I don't get the scholarship in college, or whatever that is. And so I moved through, high school and everything, very much like I've got to be the most impressive. I've got to go to the Ivy League or get a full ride, et cetera, to university. And then when I went to college, I had luckily found yoga. But at that point I was very new to it, and I knew it made me feel good. And I knew I had like a pre-exam ritual. I would always go to a hot yoga class before I took any evening exam. Instead of like cramming and studying, I was like, I know I do better with a clear mind. And I really used yoga as a tool to like fuel my performance. So still, I was like very just like identified with performance. I went to UT Austin, and I was on scholarship to go there, and I was in the honors program, and I had to get permission to take the most hours that any undergraduate had ever taken in one semester. Just because I was like the type of person that had to prove that I could do it. And not only that, I like made sure I got a 4.0 that semester. And like, I was like kind of that insane that I was like just wanting to prove to myself that I could do anything that I said I could do. And so I was super, super academic. I was pre-med. I was in the business school. I was doing all the things. And then I thought I wanted to go to medical school. At this time, again, I'd been like teaching yoga through college too. And that was really just like the thing that was lighting me up. I wanted to go to med school, but then consulting interviews come around like about a year before the actual job would start. And so I told myself, I'll go through this whole interview process to be a strategy consultant. It's like they like grill you in case interviews for the day. They're really, really intense. And like that kind of like intensity and that competition, I was like, I can do this. I can figure it out. And, each company only takes like 1 or 2 people. So it's a really, really competitive job to get. And it's probably like one of the most high paying jobs that you can get coming straight out of undergrad. And so did the whole rounds of consulting interviews, got the job, went ahead, accepted that offer. They gave me a nice signing bonus. And I was like, amazing. I made it. The rest of my life is all figured out. I make more money than anyone I know. And of course I wasn't like outwardly like this. I tied my worth to like, oh, I'm making 6 figures and I'm like 20 years old. And I was still just looking for like how I could be this impressive person. I really like, there's part of me that's like, for my parents' friends, I want them to see that I'm impressive and that my parents did a good job raising me. Like there were all these things tied in with it. And so I was in consulting for a while, again, like teaching yoga along the side. But once I actually got into consulting, I was always really good at school because it really felt like this fulfilling thing for me. I loved learning. And then when I was put into a job where I was working like 80 or 90 hours a week for someone else, and I didn't really connect to like the purpose behind the work, because with academics, it was like just to learn. And I loved learning. I loved studying, and I loved teaching. Like I tutored through college and did all of that. When I went to the job setting, I was like, immediately, I don't like this. This is not for me. I don't like to be told what to do and how to do it all the time, especially when I don't connect to the why behind it. And, in consulting, I was traveling full time essentially for this job. So Monday through Thursdays, every single week for like the 3 years that I was in consulting, I would fly around the country or the world to these different places, work for these different companies. And I just never connected to the mission behind it. It was like, how do we optimize the costs in this hospital system? Or how does this bank make more money off giving out these loans? Or whatever it was. And I just didn't really care. And so I started leading my first yoga retreats when I was 22 years old. And that was really my way to just like keep following the excitement and keep something alive within me, because I had this dream of of leading yoga retreats. And I was like, well, no time is better than now. I should just put my first one together. Worst thing, it just like doesn't work. And, I lose a bit of money on the deposit that I made, but at least I tried. And so that was kind of my first proof of concept to myself that I'm capable of doing anything that I really set my mind to, that I truly want, and that I can stay focused on actually creating and like have the discipline, do the work, and really just trust the process and learn to trust myself. So that was kind of like a tipping point, I think, in my career, is like all of a sudden I had this thing that really lit me up. And then I would just like fantasize about, well, what if I did like 5 to 10 yoga retreats a year and could do it full time? And I could leave my job and maybe I could like get by and have like a cafe job or something. I was just fantasizing about like how to get off the corporate career. Also, somewhere in the mix of that, I did my master's in nutrition. It was 2020. I was living in South Africa. I had moved there for like a 6-month leave from my job to work at a nonprofit to see if that was maybe what I wanted to do. So I was just there volunteering. The pandemic hit and I was there for 6 months with my now husband, who, we were long distance up until then. He's from Ireland. We met traveling. It was like a whole long thing there. And that was really the first time that I was like, well, what do I actually want to do? This master's program had moved online since it was the pandemic. So I was like, I can keep my crazy corporate consulting job to make money, and I can do this full-time master's program for 2 years. And so I did that, and I kind of just like burnt myself out because I was working all the time. But it was also like 2020 and 2021. So there wasn't very much to do because like you couldn't do anything. And that kind of pushed me out of the consulting world into tech. So I got a job offer. I really just took the first interview that finally something came through, and I was just like burnt out of my consulting job. And I was like, I'll talk to this company and see. And it was like a day later, they gave me an offer and I was like, yeah, tech sounds great. I'm going to go there. So then I immediately got a ton of time back. I worked more like 30 to 40 hours a week, whereas I'd been working a lot more. And then that created all of this space to really start discovering myself. So I, doubled down on my yoga. This whole time I was doing yoga, but I wasn't giving myself the space to really integrate what I was like uncovering in the practice. And, I ended up leaving the corporate world in 2024 to open my first studio. And like up until then, I had just like, again, this attachment to performance and to being this impressive person. When I finally like let go of that and just trusted myself to take the leap, the first big leap was like opening that first studio. Now everything's been like very expansive, very aligned from there. And it's like a totally different journey in life.
Yeah. I remember when I first left corporate like a year or so ago, it just felt like I stepped out of the matrix, like a matrix, leaving corporate, just, with the structure that you live in, and that realizing that there are other structures, other matrices that you can exist in too. Okay. So I want to probe deeper on the trust that you built with yourself in this process, because I'm sure it was a process in and of itself, like doing your first retreat and that really showing to you like kind of subconsciously and consciously like, oh, I can do this, and like ideating on how you could scale it. And I'm wondering if like, how did you get from that, like those early seeds of self-trust? And I'm sure it probably extended before then too, but even with just like setting goals and then accomplishing them. But how did you go from those early seeds of like trust in building something that yoga is a part of to actually making the leap to leaving that corporate matrix and starting your own studio?
Yeah, I would say trust was built in a bunch of little steps. And I think that's important. And I think, I look back on my like corporate career and I'm so grateful for it because it gave me so much stability. And I mean, so many of the skills that I learned in those jobs are like literally what have allowed me to build the business and lead the team that I have now. And so it all kind of like in hindsight makes sense. But obviously at the time I was kind of like, what's this for? Like, what's the bigger purpose? I've also always been somebody that like asks the bigger questions of like, well, yeah, who am I? Like, what am I here to do? What is this life all about? Like, who created this life? Like all these different things. And I think I've always had strong self-trust because I've always been very goal-oriented. I always have made lists and had journals and written the things that I want to make happen. But the first kind of like true proof of that, I think, was with my first yoga retreat. And that's, even though I only recently started like truly identifying more as an entrepreneur and founder, that was like the start of that journey almost 7 years ago, or a little more than 7 years ago, was, okay, I have this vision, and either I don't do it or I choose to do it. And it's really up to me. And let me see what I can create. And I really, like, from the start of it, decided, I was like, all right, if I'm going to do this and use my like PTO to do this, use my money to do this, it's going to work. And I was so like focused. I was like, this is going to work. And I'm going to learn everything that I need to learn from doing this experience. Even if it doesn't look like a success, this is the thing I need to do. And I just trusted that. And of course, like I put it out into the world, and it was a 22-person retreat that sold pretty much overnight. Just so like a lot of friends and family, and even a lot of my like consulting colleagues came on that first one, because I had been talking about like feeling like I really wanted to do more and figure out like what it was that truly excited me. And so having that go so well, obviously my retreats now that I run are probably like such better experiences, but at the time that just felt like so amazing. And that got me to start doing more retreats. So that was like the birth of my first company. And, you know, most years I was just doing like 1 or 2 retreats, but then even through the whole pandemic, I always did at least 1 retreat each year internationally in a different country. And I just continued to learn. I continued to figure out more of what this like entrepreneurship journey would look like. And I gave myself, though, a lot of time to kind of prepare. So I knew a couple of years before I actually made the leap from corporate that I wanted to do that. And I wanted to pursue yoga full time and specifically focus on the international retreats, and then building out my teacher training programs in school, which really now are the foundation of everything we built at Present Practice. Obviously, when I started this, I had no idea how big it would become. And, you know, I'm sure I'll listen to this in like a year and be like, oh my God, I thought like so small. But the first really, really big leap that I resisted for a long time was leaving my corporate career, because that felt less of just like taking a risk. It felt more of like, this is a total identity shift. And it's like, well, who am I on the other side of this? Because I felt like this just sense of security and stability. And I had like hundreds of thousands of dollars in savings at this point, but I still blamed like the money side for being I wasn't quite ready. I was like, well, maybe if I save a little more, or more of my equity vests, or I like wait for this bonus. And I think it's also really hard to leave something good for something that could be great. I ended up getting down to like 10 to 20 hours a week of work. Probably I had a leadership position at this tech company. It was so flexible. I worked with incredible people. I got paid very, very well. And I was able to teach, like I was sometimes teaching like 10 to 15 classes a week on the side, just because I love doing it. I was leading multiple, like 2024, I had 5 huge retreats with over 120 people across all of them, because one was like a 45-person retreat. It was crazy. It was very fun. And like that was the year I still had my corporate job. So I was doing like crazy. I was like living 2 worlds. And so I had no excuse other than just like there was some part of me that was just like attaching to, I think the identity around being an impressive person. It's like, well, what does it look like if I'm just a yoga teacher? Like why would I give up this like whole career that I've built, all like this money that I can make to, you know, be like a yoga teacher, which I also see as like the most like honorable, amazing thing. But at the time I was just like, what do my parents' friends think? Like, does everyone think like, wow, she just didn't live up to her potential. And taking that leap finally that came with, you know, a lot of resistance felt very scary. But it worked out, and I learned a lot in the process of like opening my first studio. And now since then I've taken so many more leaps, and it feels like I'm just constantly taking leaps now, but I've like proven to myself that all I have to do is take the leap and follow my intuition, and like the net always appears. I'm never going to be able to see the net or see the full path until I take that leap, and then the path reveals itself. And so I think I've just, through seeing that these leaps have worked out, I just have this self-trust, knowing that when I truly know, and that means like I need to quiet the just noise and really connect to like what my intuition is saying, so long as I just follow that intuition and kind of stay devoted to that, and stay devoted to like this person who I'm becoming, what they want my future to look like, then I can't go wrong. But it was like that trust was built over a bunch of smaller leaps.
Okay, there are so many directions I could go, but I think I want to hone in on this concept of taking these leaps and then seeing the net appear, because also I think as a part of entrepreneurship or taking leaps is and trying something new, especially again with entrepreneurship, creating something that isn't there. Like there's going to be there will be failures. And I think personally, when I've hit failures trying to forge my own path, it's kind of made me question the intuition that led me to taking the leap of faith. And I'm wondering if you have had that experience, and if so, how you've worked with it.
Of just like when there's been a failure?
Yeah. And I'm thinking almost of like when you opened home yoga with one of your best friends, and then it was definitely not linear because failures, I think you even talked about this at a session. It's like failures are a part of the process, but it's more of just like guidance to the thing that your ultimate vision.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's funny because I don't see anything as a failure because I'm like, cool, I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. But I've gone through a lot of like hard learnings and lessons. And I think like we can choose to see things as failure, or we can choose to see it as just part of the process. And I like make failures every day is the thing. And apparently that's my human design type number that I just have to take. I have to make a lot of like bad little decisions to like, all of a sudden it's like this really big, amazing thing that people are like, whoa, this is crazy what you've created. I'm like, yeah, if you saw like the process to create any of this, like it looks like a lot of uncertainty, a lot of doubt, a lot of questioning myself and questioning my vision, but still choosing to show up and do it anyway and like kind of be there for the ride. So I think something that did really like hit me was like, okay, I finally left my corporate job and I was like, this is it. Like I'm going all in on like, I'm opening this little studio. It was called Home. I opened it with my best friend, Carter Miles. He's an incredible yoga teacher. And we felt just so aligned on our vision for yoga and how we wanted to see more of like what we truly thought yoga is in the world. And so we were pretty aligned with like what our vision of yoga was and our commitment to the practice. And we had both taught at the studio that I was previously part of called YTX. We had both taught there a lot and really built this whole community around people that were like, y'all are like the real yoga, whatever that means. But like we weaved in a lot of philosophy. It wasn't about just like it being a hard workout class. It was like meant to challenge your edge, but also like hold you in that transformative container. And when we opened the studio, we very quickly, just a couple months in, realized that something was misaligned and it wasn't feeling the way that we thought it was going to feel. We thought we were like going to open a studio and it's going to be super successful and really easy. And we were just going to get to like yoga all the time and that we're doing it with each other, best friends. And like pretty quickly we were like, whoa, we don't even like really like teaching very much right now. We're like really dysregulated. And we had just like fundamental differences in our vision for how the studio was to run. And also just like fundamental differences in how we navigate things and problems. So I'm quite risk seeking in the sense like I'm willing to try a lot of different things and I think really big. And, that means like a lot of little failures to figure out the thing that works. And then Carter was pretty resistant to change and to trying new things. And was just much more risk averse. So we realized pretty quickly that we just like fundamentally approach things differently. We also just realized that our visions were misaligned. I wanted to be able to expand the messages and the teachings of yoga out to as many people as possible. I would have been happy making the same amount of money and profit for the business, teaching 10 times as many classes to 10 times as many people as if we just like kept it small. Whereas he was like, if we could have just really potent classes and really work deep with like a smaller group of people, like that was his vision. So fundamentally, I wanted like broad reach. He wanted, and that's why we like work so well together in trainings and all that, because we have both sides. He can go really, really deep and I can go really, really broad. But in running a studio, we just had different visions. And so luckily, like all of our kind of like yoga was training for navigating something like this, that we set the intention, to figure out what was next in a way that really was a win-win for both sides and like consciously choosing from the start peace in our relationship. Because running a business and like being stressed about the finances and stuff and just like working 7 days a week a lot is like, it's really stressful. And I know a lot of co-founders split up, like 50% of co-founders split up in like a year or something. It's actually crazy. It's a very normal thing. And a lot of times it feels like you're going through a divorce. Like you like created this baby together. And then a lot of times it can be really nasty. And what I'm so grateful for is we were really aligned going through that. We're like, hey, we're about to try to figure out something that's going to be really hard. A lot of people figure it out and they sometimes do it in like not a good way. We're choosing peace and to really look out for each other and to look for the win-win. Neither of us is trying to take advantage of the other one. Let's be really, really pure and clear on what our intentions are. And, you know, within a week, we had a contract signed. I bought him out. Everything was like really smooth and good. Obviously, there's still the ups and downs. And at this point, Carter's like my brother. Like we've been through so much. It's like we go to the depths together, but like we do everything. But you know, it was really sweet because like a year or so later, like on his birthday, this was last year, he called me just to be like, the thing that I'm most grateful for this year is you. And it's like how we navigated that together and how like supportive we've stayed of each other. And I remember the night that he told me, because he was really the one that wanted to open the studio and that I was looking for an out of my corporate job. I was like, I know this isn't it. I need to create space for what is, but I also like wanted still to have a plan. And he was like, let's open a studio. Let's open a studio. And I was like, I don't really know if that's what I want to do. Like, I love to travel. I'm like leading all these retreats and stuff. He's like, let's do a studio. It'll be fun. I'll operate it. You can like run the strategy and manage the teachers. Like you like to run like people and stuff. And I was like, cool, let's try that. And, you know, a few months into actually running the studio, he was like, I don't want to operate it. I actually do not like this. And I was like, you know what? I actually think I do. And I think I can hire the right team to manage it, to grow it. And I now see how that was just like the starting point to growing something bigger. But when he really came to his decision, you know, he sat down, he was like, let's talk about the finances next week. Let's not mix that in with the conversation. He was like, but I've gotten clarity. I want you to run the studio. I will be supportive of you and you will support me and we'll do everything, you know, in our ability to like continue to co-create in a way that feels really true and aligned to yoga. We just need to like change the structure. And I'm like so grateful for how all that process went. So it's funny because I would never consider that a failure. But at the time, it felt really, really hard to go through that. I felt like my world was falling apart because I was like, man, I left corporate for this. Like, I'm not making money. In fact, I'm losing a little bit of money. And now I don't even like my co-founder who was my best friend. And, you know, there was a point where we were like, what are we doing? And then it's just constantly like, you need to realign. And I've made so many like little mistakes or gone through those kind of like tough things of like somebody that I've been working with, or, you know, even in my first retreat company, I had a co-founder there that we ended up separating things. Like, it's just like a natural, normal thing to have to realign and to allow yourself to evolve and to grow.
I love this idea or this reframe of normalizing realignment and therefore normalizing mistakes and failures as just being a part of a process. Because I think when the mistakes happen or the little failures happen, it's like easy for that to seem, I mean, kind of going back to karma yoga, it's like being obsessed with matter, like what is happening in the material form. And it's very distracting. It gets our egos wrapped in, which is probably what's getting triggered. And really, if we zoom out, it's like, oh, that mistake is critical to, again, like realigning us to the broader vision and also like creating something that was better and more aligned than you could even imagine. So I love that reframe. I'm gonna work on that one myself. Okay, but I am curious because, you know, going back to your like teenage years, I'm sure it was probably before, of like this idea of being an impressive person. Like, I wonder, you know, that involves like having a standard or like a checklist of things that you needed to do to be an impressive person, like to qualify as an impressive person. And like, I imagine there was probably perfectionism involved with that. Is that accurate?
Somewhat. I would say that I used to be more of a perfectionist than I am now. And like, I say this because like my husband's a perfectionist. And so like now I see, I'm like, oh, I'm like, you know, everything is relative. I'm like, I'm not a perfectionist. I'm like okay with things being messy. But I certainly was for a while. Like, I was so scared of failure. And I think the failure that I was scared of was not living up to my potential. And so I wasn't like scared of losing things. So I was never scared of things falling apart necessarily, or losing money that I had. Like, that's why I was like able to put down my first big retreat deposit when I wanted to do my first retreat. I was like, worst case is I like lose this like 10 grand I put down. Like, I don't really care. So that part was never like scary to lose like money to me, because I was like, I'll learn, like I'm paying to learn a lesson essentially. But the part of me, like in my corporate career, for instance, that was like the fear I had was like, well, what if I just like stay here stuck and I'm not rising up to my potential? Or what if I leave this great job that I have where there's all this career progression, there's all this like money, and I'm just like a struggling yoga teacher. And like, what are people going to think if that's what I used all my like potential and my intelligence and like all my degree, like all these things for? So like, I was just so attached to that. And I think perfectionism like used to show up more when I was just like scared to get started. But something that I've definitely overcome is like, I very much just realized you just got to start, and like, it's going to be messy. And the process of figuring something out for the first time is going to feel messy, because like you're growing and you're expanding into somewhere you haven't been before. And so you think like everyone has it all figured out, and like everyone else got this like secret to life that like tells them what to do or how to build a company or how to write a book or whatever it is. You're like, okay, they must have gotten this like secret that I'm like, just, I don't know why did it miss me? And it's like, oh, people only learn by doing it. And like, you got to just figure it out. And specifically, like, I love creating a big studio and a community that gets to live inside of it and expand within it. I love creating teacher training programs, retreat experiences. I'm loving writing my book. I loved putting together the South by Southwest activation and pulling in all these amazing panelists to create this overall experience. And I've had to get over the perfectionism part, because it feels really vulnerable to like put your baby out into the world. Because it's like, okay, so much heart goes into creation. But then it's like, okay, we're going to open the studio, and what if people don't like it? What if people don't come? What if people think my schedule's bad, or that I chose the wrong teachers, or that they don't like the paint color on the walls? You know, there's all these things of like, well, what are people going to think? And I think that's where perfectionism is shown up. But it's like, you know what? You just got to get it out. And, you know, so long as you're living from the inside out, you're creating from the inside out. Like, the reason that you get this kind of inspiration to do this in the first place is because there is a need. There is this like aligned community that's also manifesting your creation to exist in their life. And so I've had to like reframe to see it as that, as like, I'm simply here to create and to bring these visions to life so that other people get to like create within them. So like, I get to like kind of create that container. But yeah, that was kind of like a long way of answering your question on perfectionism. I'm like, I'm a perfectionist. Right now, I would say I'm not a perfectionist. I'm like, let's just do like the messy starting stuff, just because now I'm all about just like taking action.
Yeah, I can so appreciate that. Like, now you recognize that, I mean, exactly what you just said of like, creation is messy, and then you refine later on or as you go. And then, yeah, I mean, but you don't know what to refine unless you put the thing out. And yeah, I remember, just starting like with the way I was creating things, and it was so hard to put things out at all. And I would spend like, I did a TikTok a day challenge for like a month. And then at like halfway through, I was like, I'm going to do 3 a day. And it would take me hours to film and edit these stupid TikToks, like hours, like even the podcast, like 40 hours to edit some episodes, just with just my perfectionism or my attention to detail, really. And then at a certain point, I was like, I need to just stop caring and like ship. So I even hit a situation recently, like actually today or yesterday, with a reel for the podcast where there were a couple of like very minor typos in it. It was just like capitalization and like one word was missing. It was like minor enough. I'd already scheduled the reel out, and I was like, I don't care. It's fine, which is like progress. Like, damn, I don't care like about putting something out with typos. This is great progress. And then I was like, oh, you know, I'm recognizing it, and I've been sustaining this flow, and therefore there's an opportunity to refine. So like, it's just that evolution and maybe that oscillation of like putting out and also refining. So yeah. And I love just what you said about like, you love creating, which I think is a perfect segue into the arc that is like what you put together, what you channeled really like for Yoga House, of traveling through the chakra system in order to take an idea and bring it out into form, and all of the stuff that happens in between. So I know it's kind of like you literally created a 7-day program talking about this trajectory, But if you can, kind of give like a high level summary, just so people are like tracking on what we're talking about who may not be familiar with the chakra system, and again, like what that journey's like.
Totally. So I guess I'll like kind of even take a step back a little bit. It's a lot of what we've been talking about. And it's actually like what my book is being written on as well, of like that this is it. Like this moment is like essentially the moment that you have the choice to become the creator of your life or keep seeing yourself as a victim to it.
So good.
The chakras are it's like the energy centers of your being. And I used to shy away from the chakras because it sounded so woo-woo until I really understood that they are these different levels or layers of our consciousness of the self. And so when we can really understand everything that lives in the consciousness layers of each of these and become more awake to it, then ultimately, like, we can actually rise out of living in these like lower chakras, which, to take from what Carter says, is like either you're hungry or you're horny. So it's hungry, horny, horny. So it's like the root is all about just survival instincts, food, shelter, relationship to money and all of that. And then the sacral chakra is the center of like creativity, but also pleasure. So that's like the horny part comes in. So a lot of people just like live with these like basic, just very like human needs, like constantly looking, like in the state of desire, looking for something that's outside of them. And so the idea is through practices like yoga, meditation, journaling, you start to expand your awareness and elevate your consciousness into these higher energy centers. So, the solar plexus is the third one. This is right at your navel. And this is really like your power center. So this is all about taking ownership over your life and recognizing that no one's going to come do it for you. No one's here to save you, that you are really like the source and the supply of everything you could ever create. Moves up into the heart, which is connected to purpose. It's like to the why behind, this desire, what it is that I want to create. It's, and like a layer of moving up, it's about opening your heart. It's forgiveness. It's compassion. It's loving yourself so that you can love others. Throat chakra is all about visibility and expression and authenticity and like speaking your truth and aligning to your truth. Third eye. So now we're getting into these like upper centers. Third eye is all about intuition and vision. And then crown is expanded awareness. It's where you are connected to something that is much greater than you. And so the reason I explain it first going up is that this is the part of expanded awareness, and that it's only in the state of expanded awareness that you can shift from being the victim to the creator. And what I mean by that is yoga has a framework called the kleshas. And the kleshas are the obstacles on our path that keep us suffering. And the idea or the teaching is that the first klesha, and there's 5 of them, is avidya. And that means lack of self-knowledge or the misidentification with who you truly are. And so what yoga teaches is if you are misidentifying with who you are, you create attachment to your ego, which is fueled by your preferences and your dislikes and like your attachment to your personality, which ultimately leads you into fear of change and resistance to change and not wanting to grow and expand, because it's like, well, who am I if things change? Because like, I think I understand who I am because my ego is attaching to my personality of my likes and my dislikes, but you stay very stuck. So the idea of getting to this expanded awareness is to get rid of this avidya or this misidentification with who you are and to recognize the true self, which in yogic philosophy, in different ancient spiritual philosophies and like all the religions kind of get at the same thing, is that when we're the victim, that's when we're identifying with the form of the manifestation. So the form being our physical body, and that's like fear of death or fear of illness. The form being our job title, our material possessions of like, well, who am I if I lose my house or my fancy car, or if I can't buy these things? Who am I if this title gets stripped away from me? And I think especially interesting right now when AI is replacing, so many of the jobs that people have had. Like some people have been in careers for, 20, 30 years. And AI just all of a sudden is replacing the thing that they've been doing. They've tied their whole worth and identity to. So people are left with, well, who am I if I'm not what I do? And so this shift really has to happen at the crown in this expanded awareness of, oh, I'm not going to identify with the form, with the victim. I can identify with the formless or the creator. So that eternal self, which is really recognizing that you get to decide what happens next. You are the creator of your own reality, and you are the source and the supply. So both the creator and the receiver. That anything that you get clear on, so a clear desire or intention, with using your imagination to understand how to be able to work from the end or from the destination, combined with this like steady attention, this focus, so that you can actually create the thing that you want to create. You're not letting yourself get distracted in all these different ways. You're like, no, this is what I'm doing. This all happens at the crown. That shifts you into creator. So I give all that context because that's essentially where the self by activation started, is we moved from crown to root. So it's this closed system where to really shift and to have this like creative ability and this ability to manifest anything that you desire, it starts by expanding your awareness, moving through these different layers of your consciousness or of yourself, getting through the different blocks that you have in each of these layers as well, so that you can get this insight. And so at the crown, this is where the ideas come. And this is why, not everyone is like a founder or visionary, is because they haven't quieted the thinking mind enough to be able to be in the state of the true wisdom, where it really feels like you're a channel for something that is much bigger than you. And so I never come to my ideas or my business ideas through, thinking harder or trying to figure out. Typically, my ideas come in meditation and yoga, when I'm swimming at Barton Springs, when I'm on a walk without my phone, any of that. So then we start at the crown. So crown is idea, it's insight, it's inspiration. This is like the ping, as I call it. Some people call it download. It's like the moment where you know. And it's like from that moment where you know that you're like, damn it, this is my current assignment. Like, I've got to do this. And a lot of times it feels uncomfortable because it's like, okay, I like now receive this current assignment that I am here to bring to life. And it's like, now I have to go through this whole process of bringing it into reality. But it's also this superpower of like, so long as you can get clarity, which is what lives at the crown, clarity on what you want, then there's this proven manifestation map through the chakras of how to get there. So from the crown, then it's third eye. And third eye is all about vision. And it's really about using your mind as a tool. So many of us live as just the victim of our minds. But if you can master the mind through breath work and meditation and yoga and expanding your awareness through these like limbs of the practice of yoga, then you learn to master the mind and use the mind as the powerful tool that it is to be able to imagine. So our mind typically is like daydreaming. It's making all these stories. We don't have a lot of control over it. But when we learn how to really harness our imagination to understand, okay, this is the inspiration or the ping that came to me. And let me use my imagination to understand how I can get there. So my imagination really works in like the people that I need to pull it off. Because I realize like I can't do any of this alone. I need to build the team of the people with the right resources, the right knowledge, the right capital, whatever it is, weave them together to create that thing. So typically that's my vision process. And so once you can clearly see the vision, you're like, okay, this is what I want. And I guess as we move through this, I'll layer on the example of me expanding into Now Studio, which is a 6,000 square foot space. We bootstrapped everything. We didn't take out any debt, no investment. When I got the idea for it, I had no idea how this was going to work financially. I talked to investors. They were like, this is way too soon to expand. Don't do this. And I just knew that I needed to. So the crown moment happened February of last year. I was on a hike on the Greenbelt with my husband, Ryan, and my dog, Clifton. And it was in the middle of me running a teacher training, which is always when I feel very aligned and I have these insights come through. I was also leading a training this February in Costa Rica when like the insight for South by came. So both of these were like manifestation processes, as is everything that you're creating. So I was on a hike and then I was kind of joking with my husband of, oh my gosh, what if we opened our yoga studio in this space and it was a space that had been a studio and then it was vacant. And it's kind of a joke. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh no, this is like, we have to do this. And he was like, can we not just like focus on the little one we have and like chill and have free time? And I was like, all of a sudden I was like convicted. I was like, this is the vision. And that was over a year ago. I've never like backed off that. I just I knew. And so I had the clarity of knowing. And then, I spent a couple months visioning what that would look like. So then I had led a retreat in Bhutan in the Himalayas, and I started getting inspo for what I wanted the room to feel like and for what I wanted the cafe to be like. and to theme that after my favorite monastery in Bhutan. And so I started just visioning. I started making drafts of what the schedule would be in this new space, of what kind of workshops we would do, of how we would run trainings. And I just did a bunch of like visioning work, understanding how the team would come together, like the different, really using my imagination to understand how I could make this happen. And then once I had like moved from third eye then into throat is all about communication. It's all about using your power of your word to really manifest and to put things into reality. So it means like starting to tell people. And so, far before we had our lease, because it was a really long, it took us 9 months to close on the lease. It was a really complicated lease. It's a really big, expensive space. I started telling everyone like, oh, we're expanding. We're opening the studio here. And my husband was like, stop telling people this. Like, we did not sign a lease. Like, we don't even know how much it costs. But I was like, no, we're doing this. And I was really just speaking that into reality. And I even did that with the first studio. And I went through the same process with the South by Activation. And now this process with writing my book and getting a publishing deal and all of that. So this is like, the whole manifestation process. So from the throat, it moves into the heart. So this is all connecting to, well, why do I really want it? Like, what is it that is feeling exciting to me? What is this like? What does this connect to more broadly about my purpose and myself and like what I'm here to do? And it's also about having gratitude for it before it even comes. So it's like that magnetizing it in of like, what does it feel like to have this? Like, what is it that I truly desire to create feeling wise in my body and in my life? And how can I magnetize that in and be so grateful for it before it even comes? Like, have this just deep, deep trust that it's coming. And so with the studio, it was, starting to see how this shift away from home, which was the first little studio, was evolving into now present practice, which is the brand I had for the international retreats and the trainings, but I was running 2 different companies. And then I was like, well, actually, this all feels like one, because it really just feels like this expression of me. Like, we did a whole new rebranding. It was really connecting to like, okay, more bigly, it's not just about expanding the studio. It's about stepping into a new container that allows the vision to expand beyond the ceiling that I had set it at with the first studio. So it was really connecting to the purpose. And then from there, we get into like the lower chakras, which are really like the ones that like, we're just here to do the work then and make it happen. And so the solar plexus, the third one, like from moving into the purpose, it was like, okay, I know I want this. This is why I want it. It's like, all right, I have to feel ready and make it happen. So I had to truly decide that I was ready to get the lease, that I was ready to look at the numbers, to take on the financial risk and the liability that we were doing, and to really make our business plan and strategy of, okay, if we're going to do this, this is how many memberships we need to sell. This is how many trainings we need to run. This is how much we can afford to hire people at. And it was like, cool. We had to go through all that like hard work to understand like, I'm going to do this and this is how I'm going to do it. And so that's like the process of just figuring it out. And that's the part that oftentimes feels really messy, but it's also just taking ownership over, well, no one's going to come and just like be like, here's the lease, here's the money for it. Here, it's like, I've got to create that, whether I take on investment or take out a bank loan or figure out how to make our current business be able to support this expansion. It's still ultimately up to me, and I have to decide I'm ready for this. So with that studio, we had another negotiation with a landlord, and he really hadn't been working with us and had gone back on some of the things he had said. And it was like so hard to just like make this happen. But I was realizing part of me just wasn't ready for it to happen. So it wasn't happening. And I had told Ryan that morning, and I was like, we're going into this call and we're ready. Either we're moving forward on this or we're releasing this, and we are then focusing on what the vision is if this isn't meant to be. And, rather than like going through the financials and doing all this before the call, I just like meditated for an hour. Whereas like Ryan was on his computer doing all the things. And I was like, we have to go in and see, we need to treat the landlord as if like we are manifesting him as well, seeing it as like he's going to give us the best deal. He's going to like really be here on our side to make this happen. And like, this is the story I'm deciding to write. Because I always say like, you get to decide what happens next. I was like, oh, I haven't decided that I want this to be easy and I want this to work. Now I'm going to decide. On that call, it was so easy. Like literally 3 minutes in, he was like, yes, we'll do that. And we'll throw in some extra rent. We just really want to support you. And like Ryan's on the call, like, and I was like, okay, Ryan, do you have anything to add? And he's like trying to like negotiate some little term. And I was like, no, this is good. Like, we're good. Okay. Like we had like blocked off like an hour and a half with this meeting. And it was literally like 2 minutes in, this landlord was just like, amazing. And it was really because we went in with this expectation of like, no, this landlord's like here to support. Like, this is also part of the manifestation is like, we're going to have the best landlord ever. And so far it's been awesome. Like, he's been great. And so that was the solar plexus. And then once we really decided like, okay, this is happening again, we still hadn't signed the lease, but we finally agreed on what it was. Then we were like, okay, I think we actually need to take on investment. We don't have the money for this, but we want to sign the lease. And so like September and October of last year, I was really in like the sacral chakra of like the ups and downs emotionally. And like none of that really hit me until I took ownership over this is happening. But in the sacral is where your nervous system has to be able to expand and regulate so that you can hold like the abundance that you're calling in. And that no matter what I've manifested, whether it's like the first studio or the studio expansion or now my book deal or like really big expansions that we're about to get to do in the business that I can't quite say what that looks like, or with the South by activation, it's that then you enter into all the doubt, the fear, the insecurity, the imposter syndrome. And no matter how many times I go through it and I'm like, this time is different. I don't have to feel these things because like I trust, we're good. I've proven to myself, I trust myself. It's all going to work out. It's still just like it hits you and you have to go through these ups and the downs. And it's really about just regulating your nervous system to hold all of that. And every founder I've talked to and every human I've talked to, it's like fear and doubt is just part of the process. Like you never have it figured out until you go through the process of figuring it out. So that stage is really about just like feeling all the feelings and still choosing to trust and go through anyway without attachment to the outcome. And that's really what yoga speaks on, is just surrender and trust and staying devoted to this higher self and this higher vision. And then we finally get into the root, which is bringing it to life, actually birthing it into the world, seeing it in physical form. This is the form. This is the earth element. This is actually getting to like experience opening, like we renovated the studio. We built it all out. This was all like very root stuff. And then we opened it. And there were 100 people in our first class on opening day on January 1st. And we had our training starting. Like all of this is all, and like I'm still living, the root of the manifestation of getting to see it into form, of having the team in place, having those right structures. And, with the South by activation, it was, okay, doing all the setup, like having it happen. And then actually like I showed up and I spoke on a panel every day for 7 days in a row. I, managed all like the programming. It was like actually going through the process and being in the form of the manifestation. And so that's like the most fun part, obviously, is like you see it, but it's funny because like once you're actually there, sometimes it's easy to like forget what it was all for. And something I've learned about myself, and I think like humans are like this, is like, it is never about the destination. It's never about the thing you're manifesting. It's the process of bringing it to life, of creation. And so like, I thought expanding into this new studio was like the end all. Like, we'll do this, we'll be set, we'll be able to make a good income and just like support ourselves, and the studio will be running and that'll be great. I'm going to want to teach and practice there all the time, and I never want anything else. 10 days into having the studio, I was leading the first half-day retreat. I was sitting on the stage that felt like this huge room. To me, it felt like this was just like the final big thing. I was like waiting to get to do this big half-day retreat. It was 80 people. And I looked out and I was like, this room feels so small. And it was like this crazy feeling sitting on the stage. And I had this feeling during South by too, like being on the first panel, I was like, why does this feel so small? Even though there was like incredible panelists that like flew in to be part of it. And I was like, it's always like once I get there, I'm like, oh, this wasn't it. The actual creation process and like what I'm learning and evolving through it is. And part of like, just to kind of wrap this all together, of like shifting from victim to creator, recognizing that like you can truly create anything you desire, is also in this identification with the formless. If all of creation already exists and everything is available in the present moment, like this is it, everything is already here, then it's up to us how much of creation that we get to experience, and how we experience it is manifesting it into physical form. But if we attach to the form of the manifestation rather than like the being of ourselves that actually created it, that's when we start to cause suffering. That's when we're scared about like, well, what if the studio closes? Or what if the South by activation isn't a success? Or what if, and like we get then if we attach to the outcome, that defeats the whole process. or it defeats the whole point.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's kind of, it sounds like what might come up when you're at the sacral chakra. Obviously, like this is probably all happening like kind of simultaneously, or like you're oscillating based on the developments in reality. But yeah, it kind of sounds like part of the sacral chakra. I've been thinking about it so much because of how important desire is to also like knowing what we want. And like, well, even if we get the vision of realizing that that the desire, I feel like almost fuels actually bringing it into form. Like, because is the sacral chakra associated with fire?
The solar plexus is. Sacral chakra is like water is the element, but it is where desire. So it's where desire lives. So I didn't explain like the root and the sacral very much in like the first kind of up. The root is really like the relationship to abundance, relationship to being like grounded where we're at and having like the structure that gives us this space. Because if our foundation is wobbly, we can't rise. If we're hungry, we can't focus on anything else. And then the sacral is desire. So it's not just once. It's like, well, what do I truly desire? And for me, like in the corporate world, I was very stuck there. I was like, okay, well, I'm doing all this work, but this isn't aligned to what I truly desire to experience in my life. So it took a lot of like self-discovery to understand, well, what is it that I actually want? Not what was like told to me is the thing of like, oh, you get to make all this money and you get this status and you can be a partner at the firm someday. It's like, well, what do I truly desire? So that all lives in the sacral.
Okay. Yeah. I read this book last year, although it's like it's quite dense, but I could totally reread it and learn so much more. Eastern Body, Western Mind. Oh my gosh, it's so good. And yeah, I probably need to tuck into the sacral chakra more. But yeah, I just appreciate, firstly, you're such an eloquent speaker on that system and mapping it to your own process. I was just like wowed when I saw like the closing session during Yoga House, and just now too, I'm like, you just know your stuff, and it's just so cool. And there were just so many points too when you were describing the process, and now I've like probably lost some of them, but of just like kind of the blocks that one can hit. So for example, like hitting the doubt in the sacral chakra and being like, okay, the antidote to that is to like ride those waves and still anchor into the vision that you were given. Or even with the vision, I loved what you said about this. And you've said it several times of like, when you have it clicks, the ping comes and you're like, oh no. Like that's so real. And I want to like really, yeah, just emphasize that like sometimes like we will be connected to, we will receive an idea for what we want to bring into form of something that's maybe like, yeah, I mean, it is so big, it's beyond what we might imagine for ourselves. And there is, I think it's normal, again, normalizing, like there can be hesitancy with it because it's like, oh shit, that means I have to tear down this thing that I've already built, that I've spent like my life building maybe in order to bet on this vision that I have no evidence for. But that is the process. And also going through that process, just like you're saying, that's the gift of it all. And also like we really refine, I think, our sense of awareness through these different energy centers and our intuition, which is in and of itself like such a gift. And I think I want to go into this a little bit more too with you of like, oh no, I think we're actually at time, so maybe not. Because the thing on like potential, because that's just like we'll have to talk
another
about that,
podcast.
Yeah, because that's one of my like core things too of like not fulfilling my potential, and like you've brought that up several times. So anyway, that was so good. We're gonna move into closing questions.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so what's the essence that you feel that you bring to the world?
I think it's really, I mean, you just brought up potential. I think it's really helping people align to their purpose and actually like rise to their potential. So become who they're meant to be. And I think that really starts with also giving people permission to see that this present moment has everything we ever need to do that. And that you're never going to feel ready to take any kind of leap or to start living from the inside out and realizing that you have this infinite creative potential in your life and that no one's just going to come in and save you. But I think as a teacher and now as a leader and building out this entire company, I really care about aligning people with their strengths and what I can tell they're here to do. I'm really good at seeing people's potential and where they naturally are strong and what lights them up and makes them really excited. And I'm constantly realigning their roles within our company too, because when people are really aligned to their purpose, like they perform really well. And it's been so cool to see how much people have gotten to grow just being part of our team and working in that way. And then similarly through teacher trainings, through retreat programs, and also just like students at the studio, getting to deliver these teachings that really ask people to be the creator of their life, to decide what they want their life to look like and actually design their entire life around that and have permission to live in that way.
That is so beautiful. And also I remember at South by your team just speaking to how much they love working with you, probably because of that. Like it's such a gift to live and build from our essence, but also for that to be celebrated and for there to be space to like carved out for us to do just that.
I love my team. It's the best.
Yeah, your team is very sweet, super sweet. What's something you didn't expect about stepping into your gifts?
There's a lot. I think the vulnerability of it. I think like, in talking about the chakras, like the throat chakra is actually where I've had blocks in the past. I think I'd shared this at South by, but I grew up with a really bad speech impediment as well. So I was really, really shy. I was a competitive gymnast. I did these things that didn't require me to talk very much and just to use my body's ability. And so I started tying my worth a lot to that. But, being visible as the leader, as the creator of all of this has felt much more vulnerable than I thought it would. And I've had to go through a lot of identity shifts into that because it took me a long time. And I'm talking about like until just like a couple weeks ago, probably with South by, to really shift into identifying as a founder, as a business owner, and as a leader, and realizing like no one is going to lead this for me. Like I have to lead that. This is my thing to lead. And like the team of all of our teachers and all of our staff, like they need a leader with a clear vision and clear direction. And I love creating so much. And like, for me, it used to be like, I just wanted to create the things and bring them into the world. But I wished I could just walk into the studio and no one would know who I was. And it like almost could live outside of me because it feels like such a pure reflection of what is within me that it feels vulnerable. If someone doesn't have a good experience at the studio, or someone is like, oh, why would they do a retreat there? Whatever it is, it felt like it was like a personal attack because it felt like my thing. And so now I've like made a lot more peace with that and also identified as more of like, okay, no, I am the visionary. I am the leader doing these things and realizing that kind of like visibility and then opening yourself up to criticism is, part of the process of growth. And like the bigger things you do, the more people you have that like maybe disagree. And I've been lucky that I actually like haven't run into a lot of that. But I'm sure as we continue to grow, there's people that want to see you stay small and learning not to listen to them, but to look at like the huge crowd of people that are like egging you on and like are so inspired by what you're building and what you're creating.
Mm-hmm. And I think going back to what you said too, I wonder if like just being aligned and building from the inside out, like, and from the crown chakra, it's like you are plugged into something bigger that is beyond you, that is guiding everything that you're doing, and you can't be steered wrong if that's the case. Okay, last question. What makes your soul feel rich?
I would say for me, it's feeling like I'm living out my purpose and that everything feels really aligned. So alignment is huge for me. Even in how I run a team, like clearly I love leading a team. Like that's my favorite part is the people that I get to co-create all of this with. But no one has ever asked me for a raise or anything like that or a change to their compensation. I believe so much in constantly understanding the work that people are doing, the value that we're providing. And I'm constantly adjusting people's salaries and their compensation to make sure it's staying totally aligned with the work that they're doing. And that's just kind of like an example of how I care about aligning. Like no one's asking for it, but I want everything to be able to be very transparent and very clear and just very aligned. Because I believe when everything is really, really aligned and there's a clear vision, like there's nothing we can't co-create together. And so feeling aligned, in how I structure things is really important, but also just feeling really aligned in my life and in the relationships and the people that I'm spending time around. It all comes back to prana or life force energy of doing the things that fill me up, which is doing yoga, meditating, doing breath work, doing kundalini, going on long walks on the trail, being out in nature with my dog with no phone around me, quality time with Ryan. We love traveling, doing these things that fill me up and saying no to the things that drain me. And so it really is just like being full of this life force energy so that I have all the energy to do all of these things. And like that feels very rich and fulfilling to me.
That's beautiful. I just appreciate how attuned you are to your system, to yourself, and like what is going to bring you life force and what might detract from it. And then using your creatorhood to curate your life so that it supports your energy flow. So yeah, I feel so energized. Like
all the self,
it's the yoga.
You're like forced to get to know yourself real well.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I can imagine. It's like also just, yeah, like knowing your body and like your body communicating to you like, oh, this is off. Like that's like something I've been unlocking in the past year or so. And it's just, yeah, it's telling us all the time. And obviously with the visions and ideas that we get to, it helps us. But yeah, thank you so much for being on. I've enjoyed just like hearing some of this stuff again. Honestly, I'm just like so energized to hear like, yeah, like again, how you have brought your vision into form and how you're helping people do that in so many different ways. So thank you for coming on.
Of course. And it was so great to get to meet you through South by, and thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yay. Bye, everyone. See you in the next one.